Hello there, folks. My name is Spoonks, and welcome back to another episode of Box Office Chat. This is the show where I break down the top 5 domestic box office results, see where each movie landed, and see how well each movie did. So let's get started. Number 5 was Trolls Band Together, making $3.9 million this weekend, adding to a domestic total of $88 million and a worldwide total of $183 million. So despite a new family film in theaters right now, Trolls still managed to put up a good fight at the box office. It only dropped 35% from last weekend, which is pretty solid. It's actually the best holdout of any of the movies in the top 5, which once again, given the competition, is quite impressive. It's still maintaining its core audience, and because of that, it's pushing its domestic total just $2 million away from the $90 million mark domestically, which is very good. And it puts its worldwide total just $7 million away from the $190 million milestone, which is around the film's doubling point, and I think it's going to be able to do that. I also think it's going to slowly but surely surpass the $200 million milestone worldwide, which is quite impressive, and we'll see if it can get to $100 million domestically. I think that's going to be a bit of a reach since the film is clearly on its way out at the moment despite holding very well, and there is another new animated movie hitting theaters this weekend, and that's definitely going to take a large chunk of this film's audience, so we'll see how those two fare out. But then again, it is the holidays. I'm sure some people are still gonna want to check this movie out, especially with the fact that a lot of kids are out of school, so maybe they'll give Trolls another shot. Maybe it'll get the Christmas bump it needs. But yeah, even though this is definitely the last time we will see Trolls Band Together in the top 5, it still had a modest run at the box office. It's not one of the bigger animated films of the year. It's not even bigger than the first film, unfortunately, but I still think it did pretty well given the competition it had to face off, and with how the second one was dumped onto streaming because of the pandemic, the fact that this many people came to support the third film is still quite impressive in my book. So yeah, Trolls Band Together, not while a huge hit at the box office, still did pretty okay in my opinion. Number 4 was Godzilla Minus One, making $5 million this weekend, adding to a domestic total of $34 million and a worldwide total of $57 million. Godzilla Minus One also putting up a good fight this weekend. It's still maintaining a core audience. It's still holding very well. It's honestly one of the few movies this month that is really capturing audience's attention, which is quite impressive. It's about to surpass 60 million worldwide, which is fantastic, and also 40 million domestically, and maybe even it may be able to sniff 50 million domestically if, it can still maintain its core audience. It still holds well and puts up a good fight against all the competition coming out this holiday season. It will be interesting to see how this movie specifically does against all the rest of the competition, since this is a much more limited release for the film, but it's still doing pretty well for itself. I don't know what the budget is for this movie because I believe I said this last week. The director came out and said that the $15 million budget was inaccurate, so I don't really know how much this movie costs exactly, but I'd still say this is a very successful total for the film for an international release film from Japan. Obviously, with it being Godzilla, there's obviously more interest for this film, but I also just think that the movie is just very good to a lot of people. A lot of people are really liking it, and a lot of people are encouraging others to go and check it out, and they are, in fact. Like I said, this is one of the few films this month, really, that is pulling audiences' attention and really having these strong hold and becoming quite the sleeper hit at the box office right now. So yes, another solid weekend for Godzilla Minus One. Not much more else to say here, except it's the little movie that could, pretty much. The sleeper hit I think the box office really needed right now. Number 3 was The Boy and the Heron, making $5.5 million this weekend, adding to a domestic total of $23 million and a worldwide total of $100 million. So as I talked about a little bit last weekend in regards to this film's successful opening, it seems that it was a bit front loaded. It didn't have a huge drop by any means, but it still fell 58% from last weekend. That is still rather a big hit to take for this movie. Once again, with these animated Japanese films, they are very front loaded and then take big hits in the weeks after, which is unfortunate to see. But still, though, this movie is headed in the right direction. It's still making a ton of money for itself. Domestically speaking, this is Studio Ghibli's biggest movie ever. It has surpassed the entire domestic run of The Secret World of Arrietty, which made 19 million back in 2012, I believe. This film has already surpassed that, which is very good to see. Once again, Studio Ghibli's audience is growing domestically, and this film is further proof of that. And worldwide, the film surpassed the $100 million milestone, which is more than enough, I'd say, for this movie. This is an absolutely astounding total for this movie to be at. Certainly one of the biggest movies of the moment right now, definitely. And it's showing that Studio Ghibli's audience is even growing worldwide to where the movie has surpassed, once again, the $100 million milestone, which is very good to see. So yeah, despite the fact that it had a pretty steep drop off this weekend, this film is still headed in the right direction. It's still a pretty big success, even though it's probably not going to be around much longer due to the bigger movies hitting theaters this weekend, all the competition. I'd still say that this movie is headed in the right direction. It's still a big win for the studio, a big win for animation, and yeah, overall not much more else to say except job well done. Number 2 was The Hunger Games: Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, making $5.8 million this weekend, adding to a domestic total of $145 million and a worldwide total of $292 million. So The Hunger Games is still doing very well for itself. It had the second best hold out of any movie in the top 5. If it wasn't for Trolls, it would have. It only fell 37% from last weekend, which is still a very promising hold for the film. It's still maintaining a core audience. It's still holding very well. Word of mouth is still pushing this movie to new heights, it seems, even with its first major big competition coming out this week. More on that later. But yeah, because of this, it puts its domestic total just $5 million away from the $150 million milestone. It's definitely going to get to that total by the end of this week. And it puts its worldwide total just $8 million away from the $300 million milestone worldwide, which once again, it'll get to by the end of this week. Once again, The Hunger Games just really tapped into an audience. It's right now the biggest domestic hit of the moment right now. People are rushing out to go and see this movie, and because of that and how well it's been doing out of all the movies in the top 5, I feel like this is the one that's probably gonna hold the best into Christmas. It has the best chance of staying in the top 5, at least in my opinion, or at the very least coming close to the top 5 given how well it's been doing. I think it's gonna get a Christmas bump, and it's still gonna hold very well even with the big competition. The amount of movies probably gonna push it out of the top 5. I still think it's gonna be able to reach its milestones and still make some more change for itself. But still, even if it doesn't, even if it does take a big hit this weekend, which is very likely, it still wouldn't change the fact that it's a very successful movie, only costing $100 million, about to surpass $300 million worldwide. That is nothing to sneeze at. I don't see how anyone could be looking at these numbers and being upset about them, unless if you want to compare them to the original Hunger Games, which I really don't think you should. This is a prequel came out several years after. The fact that it's made this much money alone is quite impressive. So yeah, not much more else to say except good job, The Hunger Games. You're still making a lot of money, still putting up a good fight at the box office. Hopefully you can continue to go up from here. And finally, let's end the video off with the number 1 movie of the weekend, which was Wonka, opening with $39 million this weekend domestically and $152 million worldwide. This is the 4th biggest opening for a family film this year, topping Trolls Band Together and knocking Elemental out of the top 5, but still sitting behind The Little Mermaid, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, and the Super Mario Bros. Movie. So this is definitely an interesting opening weekend. I think this movie met a lot of people's expectations, and for some people, it may have come a bit under. I just think that the reason it may have come under a lot of, maybe not a lot of, but for some people's expectations was the fact that I just think the premise for this movie was just so weird and niche. Just the idea of making an origin story about Willy Wonka may have turned some people away, and also for some reason a lot of people didn't realize that this movie, based off of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, wasn't a musical again for some reason. And I think that may have also kind of hurt it a bit. But still, though, given the weird premise for this movie, I'd still say this is a decent start. Again, it's the holidays. People do seem to like this movie. It got an A- cinema score. A lot of people are saying that's because a lot of people didn't know that this was a musical, which is why it got the A- cinema score. But otherwise, a lot of people do seem to be really liking it. A lot of people were saying it was a lot better than expected. And I could see this domestically having strong legs. I could see this getting a major Christmas bump this weekend. I could see word of mouth carrying this throughout for the next couple months or so, even, because there's a lot of competition for this movie to face off of. Worldwide, however, things are great. Things are much better. The movie costed $125 million to make, and it's already surpassed the $150 million milestone. This is definitely doubling that budget within the next couple weeks. Internationally, this movie is taking off. People are loving this movie, so we'll just have to wait and see if that can catch on domestically. I think it's got a shot. I mean, there's a lot of movies that people actually want to see coming out this holiday season, even though there's a lot of movies coming out this holiday season. So I think this movie will be able to take advantage of that. This is definitely seeming like it's going to become the big holiday movie of the year for now, unless something unexpected pops up. Like, you never know, one of these other big movies may take off by surprise. But yeah, things are looking pretty solid for Wonka, at the very least internationally and worldwide. This movie is already off to a great start. Domestically, it's off to a decent start, I will say. I just think the word of mouth really needs to take off. I just think a lot of people are probably just gonna have to see this and give this movie a chance. But I have hope and I have faith, given it's a holiday season and given how a lot of people are really liking this movie. I think this movie will be able to sustain that solid word of mouth, that solid momentum. So yeah, overall, a pretty decent opening domestically, but a great start worldwide. We'll see where this movie goes, but I have hope that this movie will do very well. And those were your top 5 domestic box office results for this weekend. But we're not quite done yet, as we've got another week ahead of us and new movies hitting theaters. And this weekend, we have a whopping 3 new wide releases, folks. Apparently, everyone wants that Christmas bump this weekend. So bear with me, folks. We got a lot to talk about right now, starting with Anyone But You. This is the new R-rated rom-com starring Sydney Sweeney and Glenn Powell, and out of all the holiday movies coming out this year, this is by far the biggest wild card. I can see this movie overperforming or underperforming. The reason I say it can overperform is because so far the marketing, at least from my perspective, has been pretty solid. I've been seeing a lot of stuff for this movie. They're definitely selling it on the star power of Sydney Sweeney and Glenn Powell, which is 100% what they should be doing, and adding on to the fact of the star power between the two of them. I think that's going to generate some interest into getting some people's attention, as well as the fact that in terms of the mainstream movies, this is one of the only films geared towards an adult audience. I think other than Poor Things and maybe Ferrari, this is the only R-rated movie coming out this holiday season, so that might help it out a bit. And there does seem to be some buzz. I do see some people talking about it here and there. The downside, though, is that this is an R-rated romantic comedy, and unfortunately not a lot of people go see these movies anymore. You want to talk about just comedies in general, it has been a pretty rough year for that. And I also think with this being the third film coming out this weekend, I also think this movie might get lost in the shuffle and may get overshadowed by a lot of the other bigger movies coming out this holiday season. Had this come out maybe earlier in this month, this movie probably would have stood out, maybe become the violent night of the month, being the one adult film out during this time of the year and having strong legs, maintaining a core audience. But with it coming out this weekend in particular, I'm just worried that it's probably going to once again get lost in the shuffle. So either way, yeah, big wild card for me. This can go either way. There are ways I can see this movie doing well and this movie doing poorly. The other big wide release is Migration, the new animated film from Illumination. Now, while I'm not expecting much for the film's opening weekend, it is Christmas Eve on Sunday, and many families just don't go to the movies around that time. And also, there was just another family movie that came out with Wonka, and that seems to be stealing a lot of this movie's attention. I still have hope for this movie. I think that because it is the only animated movie out right now and is only going to be the only animated movie in theaters until Kung Fu Panda 4, one animated movie that isn't a re-release of a Pixar movie. I think this movie is going to have very solid legs. I think there's enough in this movie to capture people's attention that's working for this movie. The marketing, given that it's an Illumination movie, has been excellent. I've been seeing a lot of stuff for this movie. They did stuff with Jersey Mike's and Don Platinum. They had a big presence at this year's Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. I think the premise and the character designs and the whole look of the movie is cute enough to get families enticed to see this movie. And if we've learned anything from Puss in Boots and Elemental even, an animated movie doesn't have to have the best opening in order to be a success. Those movies had pretty rough starts, but through positive word of mouth and good audience reception, those movies were able to do way better than expected. So yeah, I have a lot of faith in this movie. Maybe not in its opening. I don't think it's going to have a great start, but in terms of its legs and how it does in the long run, I think this movie can exceed expectations. I have hope for this movie. And then lastly, there is Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, the sequel to the surprising smash hit that was the first Aquaman and may very well be the last DC film in the pre-James Gunn era. Now, 5 years ago, this would undeniably be the big holiday hit. This would 100% be number one movie this year, like big opening, strong legs, billion-dollar smash hit, without a doubt, 100%. But we are living in very different times right now in terms of comic book movies. People just don't have the passion or the excitement or the hype they used to have for these movies, and unfortunately it looks like this movie is going to suffer the same fate. I do not think this movie is going to have a very solid opening. It's going to take number one because it's the new wide release. It's the biggest movie out of the three. It's going to be number one. It has the most screens, the biggest, yada yada yada. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah, but aside from that and those factors, and again, it's a sequel to Aquaman, and a lot of people want to see that movie, so I'm sure there's going to be some people curious about this. I just don't think the audience interest is there for this movie. The buzz is just not there. I don't see a lot of people talking about this movie or getting excited. The marketing has been okay. I've been seeing the trailer a couple times and a couple promos for it here and there, but that's about it. And ultimately, this is the last film in the DC universe before James Gunn resets it. So, like, what is even the point of seeing this movie? Clearly, maybe as a last hurrah to at least celebrate this era at the very least. I don't know. I have very low expectations for this movie. Again, it's probably going to open to number one. It is out of the three new releases, it is the biggest one coming out this weekend. But other than that, I just have no hope for this. Very little hope for this movie. I think it's going to get overshadowed by Wonka, and I think it's going to get overshadowed by a couple of the other big holiday movies coming out on the horizon. I just have very little faith in this movie, unfortunately. But we'll see how well this movie truly does, as well as the rest of the movies that land in the top 5 on the next Box Office Chat. And that's going to do it for this week's episode of Box Office Chat. What did you all think of the results? Were you satisfied, unsatisfied? Comment down below and let me know. If you like this video, hit the like button. If you like this channel, hit the subscribe button. Follow me on all the social media links right there. And until next time, everyone, stay sharp.